All right, we're live. This is Dr. Brian Mowll, the diabetes coach, and I am here with Drew Manning from Fit to Fat to Fit. And Drew's got an incredible story, and I have been wanting to actually connect, Drew, with you for a while to have you come on and share this and just to talk to you a little bit more about your journey. I've got a lot of questions myself, so excited to talk to you. But just for people who don't know who you are, don't know your background, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you put your body through and what your background is and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So most people know me as the Fit to Fat to Fit guy. So what that is in a nutshell is back in 2011, I had this crazy idea. Before 2011 though, I was a personal trainer. I became a personal trainer in 2009, but I grew up my entire life in shape because I played sports. I played football and wrestling from a very young age. I grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and we all were active and played sports. And so being in shape or being, physically fit kind of came naturally for me. It came easy because it was a byproduct of playing sports and being active as a kid. And then fast forward to becoming a trainer, here I was, someone who had never been overweight a day in my life, trying to help people, my clients who were overweight pretty much the majority of their lives. And there was an obvious disconnect because for me, I saw transformation as easy. You just eat less calories and you work out and you put down the junk food and you go to the gym, and it's not that difficult, right? You just do it. And that was my mentality back then. And so I had a client back in the day tell me, Drew, you don't understand how hard it is for me or for people like me, because for you, it's been easy your entire life. And for me, it's really, really difficult. And so I kind of took that to heart. I was like, okay, maybe there's something I'm missing here as a trainer. Maybe there's something I need to learn so I could better connect with my clients and better help them. Because I would get frustrated, to be honest with you. I would be more judgmental towards them. Like, why can't you just do these things that seem so simple to me? And then this idea popped up in my head, as crazy as it sounds, but I was like, what if I got fat on purpose, documented my journey of gaining weight, and maybe that would motivate people in a weird sort of way. And so I decided to do this back in 2011. I stopped exercising for 6 months. I ate a standard American diet, and we can dive into what that consists of. And I put on 75 pounds of pure fat during those 6 months. And this story went viral. I was very fortunate to be landed on a bunch of TV shows like Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, Jay Leno, The View, because it was a crazy idea and people, were intrigued by it. And since then, I wrote a book about my journey called Fit to Fat to Fit. I had my own TV show, 2 seasons of Fit to Fat to Fit on A&E, where we put other trainers through that process. Because to be honest with you, Dr. Brian, I was truly humbled by my experience. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be. And I think that's what resonated with people was the fact that they saw me humbled. I saw how wrong I was in my approach to helping people. And people could relate to me so much more after having done that first experiment back in 2011.
That's interesting. And I think you're right. I get a lot of clients sharing their experiences with me as well. And it's not just the fat loss, but it's, working with people with diabetes, it's health change in general. And there's sort of this, with diabetes, there's this idea in the natural health community, in the conventional medical world, I think just generally in the general population, that people who have type 2 diabetes, all they really need to do is just start exercising, move their bodies more, stop eating so much junk food, and their diabetes would go away. And the problem is that it just isn't true. Number one, it's a lot more complex than that. Number two, it's not just about eating and not eating. There's so many factors that go into what we eat, whether we exercise regularly or not. There's self-sabotage. There's, mental and emotional factors, food addiction. There's so many things that play into that, let alone how the body processes those nutrients, hormone balance, and so forth, genetic factors. There's, unique traits that I don't think maybe you can appreciate unless you put yourself through something like that. And so I guess let's just start with that. What are some of the lessons you've learned? And I know you've shared this information for people who are hearing this story for the first time. You can go on YouTube and put Drew's name in, and you'll see a lot of the interviews he did, the stories he shares, and it's powerful, man. It's super powerful. But maybe just in a nutshell, what are some of those biggest lessons that you picked up from going through that fat loss, weight loss journey?
Yeah, so that first experiment, because I've done it twice now. I'll talk about.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I've done it twice. I did it in 2020, but we'll get to that. So the first time I did it, the lessons learned, because that was my first time being overweight, there was a few different lessons. The first one is, how much of transformation is mental and emotional. Before I did it, I used to think, like you, transformation is physical. Eat less calories, work out, and you train your body, and boom, you're successful, right? You see the results. So thinking physical transformation is just physical is kind of a, for me is not a very correct approach at helping people. It's like when someone goes to their doctor and the doctor's like, hey, you need to lose weight. They're like, okay, thanks a lot for the advice. But it's so much more mental and emotional than people think. And so that was the very first lesson that I learned was like, man, I am so wrong in my approach to helping clients, because it's like, hey, here's your meal plans, here's your macros, here's your calories, here's your workouts. You do it, and then you'll see the results, and then your problems will go away. It's a lot more complex than that, like you mentioned. So that was the first lesson. The second lesson is how powerful emotional eating is, and the emotional connection to food is a huge factor for people, because food is the most easily accessible drug that we have available to us here in the United States. Because it's a similar mechanism, and the brain is similar to what drugs does when we take it. It's a very similar, dopamine hit that we get when we eat certain foods, and it makes us feel good temporarily. And because that dopamine hit, our brain wants more of that. So we get multiple dopamine hits per day with breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, dessert, all the stuff that we have available. I mean, for me, it was so surprising for me going through that, where I ate that junk food for 6 months, which I lived on a standard American diet. So like highly processed foods that we have here in America that are cheap, affordable, convenient. And let's be honest, I mean, the food tastes so good and it's so delicious. It's designed to taste that way. It was hard for me as a personal trainer, someone with discipline, to get off of that food and then eat healthy food again. I was surprised at how much I struggled with it. And let alone someone that's been eating that way for years or decades, to then all of a sudden, telling them to eat whole foods is a very difficult task to take on for people, especially to be consistent with, because their bodies almost fight back against them. It's like getting someone off of drugs and going through withdrawal symptoms. It's like, hey, our body's been conditioned to have this drug or this food for so long, and now that we don't have it, you don't always feel great right away. I remember feeling grumpy and moody and having headaches and feeling hangry when I switched over to eating the healthy foods at first for the first couple of weeks, because my body was like, what is this? This isn't Cinnamon Toast Crunch. This doesn't do the same thing for us when we eat this, broccoli or chicken. It's not the same reaction. And so that was really eye-opening for me to experience that firsthand. And then I developed more empathy for those that struggle, because I'm like, oh, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And here I am, pretty disciplined guy, and I was struggling with cravings. So it opened up my eyes to how powerful emotional eating is, and how powerful the emotional connection to food is, but also biologically too. That's a difficult thing to just say, hey, eat less and work out more. And so my eyes were open. I was truly humbled from that first experiment.
So once you had gained the amount of weight that you planned on gaining and you decided to start losing, I'm sure you had a plan, a fitness plan and a dietary plan. Did you have any trouble sticking with that? Was it, I know you're a pretty disciplined person. So was it just plug and play for you, or did you, and I know you explained that you had some things you had to overcome, feelings and so forth, but did you have periods where you actually fell off track and had to get back on track, or with your personality and your history, were you able to just sort of put that into practice and make it happen?
That's a good question. Yeah, I struggled for sure. I had intense cravings for the first 2 weeks, I would say, where I kind of just had to willpower my way through it. Now, I'm the type of person, playing football and wrestling, like I can tap into that part of my mind where I can go hardcore and push myself. I would say the majority of the population does not have that ability to do that. The thing that kept me on track was the accountability to my audience, my followers, people doing the program with me. So I was like, okay, if these random strangers from across the world who are doing the program with me can show up and try their best every single day and do this program that it made accessible to everyone, I was like, I can do this too. So that helped me push through those times where I remember being at the grocery store and wanting the Cinnamon Toast Crunch or like the Mountain Dew or the things that like became my comfort foods during that first experiment. There was, in those moments I had to think about, okay, what is my audience going to think if I give in, or how am I going to be able to, show up and tell people to do this if I can't do it myself? So it definitely helped me push through. I struggled with cravings. I would say that after 2 weeks, the cravings become more manageable, and I was able to stay consistent a little bit easier because of that. But the first 2 weeks, I had definitely struggled to stay consistent, but I did, just because I'm able to tap into that mindset to be disciplined.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up accountability to the group, because I think that's a tool that everyone can use. We can have groups, peer groups, friends, programs that we can use for that same purpose, right? To tap into some support and accountability. I think that's crucial. Now, how much of your fat loss, weight loss, back to your ideal weight or your current weight or whatever it is, was diet, and how much do you think of that was exercise? Did you go back and hit the gym hard? Were you doing hours of cardio a day, sweating it out in the sauna? Like what was the split there of your strategy to lose weight?
It's so interesting. This part always surprises people, because people assumed that I was being a personal trainer, I would be in the gym for hours a day, 7 days a week, like getting those results, like, cause I can push myself that hard. But here's the thing is, like, I'm also a dad and I have kids, and I had, at the time in 2011, I had a job in the medical field while I was doing Fit to Fit full time. Right. So it's not like I had a ton of time to spend in the gym. So my exercise was a small percentage. It's a smaller piece of the puzzle than people think. I think people think exercise is end all be all. If you exercise and do hours of cardio, you're going to get the body you want. But really, in all honesty, you could probably attest to this too. Exercise doesn't do a whole lot it doesn't do as much as people think it does for body composition. Yes, it helps out, but it's not this huge piece of the puzzle. So I did 5 days a week of 30 to 40 minutes of exercise. Monday, Wednesday, Friday were resistance training days. Tuesdays, Thursdays were high intensity interval training cardio days. So, I didn't do hours of cardio. I did maybe 20 minutes of 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off of like a sprint, followed by, walking for 30 seconds, and repeat that pattern for 20 minutes. Saturday and Sunday were my days off, where I would play with my kids, be with my family, and do that sort of thing. And so, and then the rest of it was diet. And that's really probably the bigger piece of the puzzle for actually seeing results, was staying consistent with my diet, which back then in 2011, a lot of people think I'm this keto guy. I didn't really do keto back in 2011. It wasn't very mainstream. So I was more of a paleo-ish approach, higher protein, moderate amount of fat, moderate amount of carbs, kind of more of a balanced approach. And, 5-6 small meals per day is kind of the way I did it back then. And it worked. I got back to fit, lost the weight. But I would say, if I had to give people some advice, sleep and stress management are probably the biggest key components of weight loss and overall health. And then diet, and then, exercise, and then supplements are probably towards the bottom, in my opinion, as far as like pieces of the puzzle. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And where does the emotional piece come in? Because you made a big point of talking about early how important that was. But then we didn't really talk about it here in the last few minutes as you went through your journey. So, where did that piece fit in, and where do you think that fits in for a lot of the people you work with who are trying to lose weight?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. This is where it's so dependent on the person, the traumas and the challenges that they've had in their life that have led them up to this, where they are now. And so I think for some people, it's a bigger piece. For other people, it's a smaller piece, just depending on what they've been through and how intense their emotional eating is, and have they figured that part out? Like, do they do therapy? Do they meditate? Do they journal? Do they work with professionals to overcome these triggers that cause them to emotionally eat, and how much work they've already done on themselves. And so it could be a big piece for some people that are just getting started, that don't really see the correlation between the physical side of weight loss and the mental, emotional, spiritual transformation that they've already been on, that the journey that they've already been on. So it depends on the person. Some people have some serious trauma tied to their eating habits, and they're not even aware of it yet. They don't really see the connection of like how maybe the way their parents raised them or how people treated them as a kid that helped them gravitate towards food at a younger age. And now for the past 20 years, 30 years have created this loop, this neural pathway to where they are dependent on that food to help them get through tough times, or maybe they're sad and lonely and depressed, and so they turn to food, and so they have a longer journey ahead of them. So, but maybe there's other people that have a good support system. They have a therapist. They've done counseling, and they kind of like can connect those dots, and they're more aware of it. And so maybe for them, it's a little bit more under control, where they're like, "Hey, normally I reach for this food or this alcohol in these moments, but now that I'm more aware of it, I can take a step back and not let those thoughts and emotions control me to go reach for the alcohol or the food, whatever it is that they normally do." And then they have a better hold on that emotional eating, and they're maybe further along in their journey than someone that's just now getting started with like, "Oh, I see how the way my parents raised me, and maybe how I was teased as a kid kind of plays into my emotional eating, that here I am 40 years old starting to figure this out now." So does that make sense? It's kind of it's a very individual question depending on the person.
Yeah. No, you're right, for sure. And it is, you've got to take the step to really try to understand yourself. And I think those underlying patterns, there's so many reasons that we eat. I wish it was just for nourishment, but we eat for comfort, and we eat for entertainment. We eat for, sometimes it's an addiction. Sometimes it's, to cover up some sort of emotion we don't want to feel at the time. So there's social reasons. I mean, the list goes on. And usually we're not making the best choices when we're eating for those reasons, as opposed to just purely for nourishment. I would say most people probably don't eat purely for nourishment, and I think maybe some of that's okay. It's good to enjoy your food, but at the same time, we don't want to push that too far. So I think knowing yourself, understanding that about yourself, there's patterns that get set up in childhood for certain foods that we want, rewards. Maybe your parents gave you ice cream every time you got an A on your report card, and then now you want ice cream when you're feeling sad for some reason, and you just don't make that connection. So we have to kind of dig a little bit deeper sometimes into those things and then address them. Sometimes just shining light on them is powerful, right? Just say, okay, I didn't realize that about myself. I see that. Now maybe I can be mindful and aware and make a decision with that in mind next time. But those are important. The other thing is there's some research on hypothalamic control of weight regulation. And it seems like there are certain people who have tight weight control and others who do not have tight weight control. They actually don't have very good hypothalamic control over weight. And those people tend to gain weight much faster and easier. They also can lose weight faster and easier, supposedly, but it seems to be the other direction. It seems like they gain weight and they just don't establish like a really good settling point with their weight. What was your history? I mean, do you feel like, was it hard for you to initially gain weight to kind of break through your normal weight? Did you have to really push it? Or are you someone that, you just started eating junk food and stopped exercising and the weight just piled on?
It was a good question. And I think it surprised a lot of people how quickly I gained the weight, because I think for me, I have brothers that are bigger, and I have a tendency to gain weight really easily if I'm not disciplined or in control of it. And so for me, I was surprised at how quickly I gained the weight. I think the first month I gained 22, 24 pounds in the first month. And I didn't really have to push it. I mean, I had to eat a lot of calories, but I didn't have to force feed myself. Like, it was easy to eat these processed foods in large quantities because they don't really fill you up. Like, you could eat a huge bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch And then an hour or two later, you're starving again because you get a huge spike in blood sugar, and then you get a crash, and then your body's signaling you like, hey, we're not feeling so good. We want that spike again. Eat some other processed carbs to get us back up there where we were. And so you create this vicious cycle where you're constantly needing these spikes, and then you feel exhausted and horrible from the crashes. So you want to get that spike again. And so that's kind of the the emotional roller coaster of eating these foods, is like constantly doing that. And so I was gained weight pretty easily, to be honest with you. But on the other hand, yes, my genetics, I think, also played a factor in how I was able to lose the weight and get back to fit. Because like I said, I've done this twice now, and I've, my homeostasis is more so on the leaner, fitter, lower body fat, lower body composition spectrum. And so, yeah, I was able to get back to fit probably easier than your average person who's been overweight for years or decades, that's been trying to lose weight. So what I don't want people to do is compare my results from doing fit to fat to fit and thinking, oh, well, Drew can do that, I should be able to do that too. And this is the problem with the fitness industry, is people will see people like me or other influencers online on social media and be like, oh, if I do this meal plan and this workout program that this person does, I will look like them. And that's a huge problem I have with the fitness industry, where we try and make it simple for people, saying, hey, if you do this, this, and this, you'll look like this. And it's not that hard. You should be able to do it. But I think there's a lot of research that you mentioned and pointed out that it's not that simple. It's very complex, and it's very bio-individual, depending on the person, their history, their genetics, their epigenetics. All those factors play a role in how easily they can lose weight, or how hard it is for them to lose weight. And this is why I'm such a big proponent of having empathy for those that struggle with weight loss or have larger bodies, because we try and make it so easy. We try and think, oh, why don't you just eat less food? Like, eat less food and work out and you'll be skinnier. But it's not that simple. There are people that try and struggle, and for them it's 10 times, 100 times more difficult than someone else. And it just doesn't seem fair that someone has to put in so much effort for such little results versus someone that puts in little effort and gets big results. It doesn't seem fair, and people get frustrated and quit because it can be complicated. And this is why it's such a way more of a mental and emotional journey for people.
Do you think there are people who just can't lose weight, or do you think that it is possible for everyone? It just might be a lot more difficult, and they might need a different program?
I honestly think it is possible for everyone, but the amount of effort they have to put in is going to differ. And are people willing to put in that much effort? And do they have the time, the money, to dedicate to, health and fitness, 2 hours a day in the gym, or meal prepping and counting their calories and their macros and weighing their food? Is everyone really in a position to be able to do that? If they're a single parent, they have kids, they have 2 jobs, and they're studying, like, how realistic is for someone to dedicate that amount of time to doing that? I don't know, but I do think, is it possible? Sure. Is it easy? No, I don't think so. But, in a perfect world, situation, sure, if we could get them to dedicate most of their life to having healthy habits and, like I said, meal prepping and exercising, but at the same time, they have a life to live. And sometimes other things become more important, like with kids and responsibilities and finances. Sometimes at certain phases of life, they might not be able to dedicate a whole lot of time to health and fitness. And so they have to get by with just maybe 10 minutes a day of walking and maybe, a couple of vegetables here and there. And maybe that's their best effort right now. So
it's interesting because, if you look at the diet side versus the exercise side, they are very different. I agree that fitness is, for just fat loss, fitness plays a much smaller role. I think that diet is going to move the lever the most. I do think for weight maintenance and overall health, I think body composition is really important, and metabolic flexibility. I think we need to work on building muscle, becoming leaner, and so forth. But I do agree with you. And, if you think about it, it shouldn't really take a lot of time to eat well. I mean, I get what you're saying about meal planning and prepping and handling kids. So, if your kids are eating one way and you're eating a different way, that could certainly add some time. And I also appreciate that everybody's got a certain bandwidth, a certain amount of energy that they can devote towards, their life and their health. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes we just can't deal with it. It's like, I can't put the energy and the time into that. So I'm just going to eat whatever's in front of me. I'm going to just try to, keep it simple. But I do think there's a way around that. I think if we lean into it a little bit more, I think it's less time consuming than people think. I guess that's my point, that you're eating anyway. It doesn't really take any more time, or doesn't have to take that much more time to eat, more healthily than unhealthy. But it's more, I think, the mental piece, the emotional piece, like how much energy do you have available to spend on this? And, stress is a factor, sleep is a factor, as you've mentioned. So those things may be working against you if you're in a certain phase of life, or, in a challenging period.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I think another factor that we got to throw in there is the accessibility to this food. Our government and our current society, the way it's set up, is an uphill battle for people to eat healthy. They have to go out of their way, spend more money, and dedicate more time to prepping real whole foods that are more expensive than the cheap processed foods, because of the way we have it set up. And like all the unhealthy stuff, it's more convenient. It's designed to taste really better than real food. And so, of course, kids and adults are going to choose the pizza and the French fries over broccoli and kale, things like that. But also the accessibility to those foods. It's so much easier to push a button on your phone and have food delivered to you that's generally unhealthy food, and it's going to be cheaper than it is to go out and buy grass-fed, grass-finished, free range, all those things that we have to pay a premium for that. Why should we have to pay a premium for that? Well, when that's, that should be less expensive, right? It's crazy that soda with all kinds of ingredients is cheaper than water. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the uphill battle that people have to face as well, is the accessibility to that food. And so that's another argument, another hard thing that people have to deal with, because it's generally the unhealthy food that's more accessible and more convenient, and it tastes better and makes you, that's the hard part. But is it possible? Yes. If people really want to find a way to make it happen, they will make it a priority. They'll invest their time and money into the healthier food. But it's not always that simple for people to just be like, hey, go for the grass-fed, grass-finished stuff, even though it's, double in price or more expensive, and it's going to take you more time to prepare it.
Yeah. And while I 100% agree that that's a healthier way to go, I don't even know if that's necessary just for the weight loss or fat loss part of it. I mean, if you're strapped, and you're trying to conserve financially, I still think just, eat meat or protein more than, potato chips. And even if it's not the best quality meat, you're still going to be doing yourself a lot of favors. So
good point.
We talked about a lot of challenges, right? I mean, the food is engineered today to taste really good, to be hyper palatable, to be addictive, the packaging, the taste, it's really designed for that purpose. And we're stressed, our schedules are tight, we've got a lot of responsibilities. So there's a lot working against us. What are some tools or strategies that you think people can use, that you coach people to use to kind of help them be more successful with a lifestyle change like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So ever since doing Fit to Fit the first time and then doing again the second time in 2020, my main focus is to help people overcome their mental and emotional hurdles more than any kind of focus on the physical side of weight loss. Like, there are some tips, tricks, and hacks that I throw in there on the physical side. And you kind of mentioned them on, like, hey, get in protein, try and get in a high amount of protein every single meal, because protein is the most satiating macronutrient out there. So if you eat, high amounts of protein, you are just going to feel fuller longer. And that's just kind of, how it's going to be. And so if you have access to eggs and tuna and chicken, which are some of the cheaper sources of protein out there, you can definitely do, that's one tip, trick, or hack that you can use to help with body composition, right? But my main focus is helping people also on the mental and emotional side. So I'll actually have them focus on overcoming these mental and emotional hurdles by implementing some techniques that I've found to be very effective for people that have nothing to do with weight loss. It really helps them to train their brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And if you could train someone's brain to become comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, that can carry over into the physical side of weight loss, where you are having to do uncomfortable things like work out and maybe eat less food and eat healthier food, which can be uncomfortable and harder for people because they've been programmed to choose the easier path. And so if we could get them doing things that are uncomfortable, but they become comfortable with those uncomfortable things, that helps them with other aspects of transformation. So what that looks like for me is I'll have people do a list of making their bed first thing in the morning, meditating, doing a gratitude journal of 3 to 5 things every single day that they're grateful for, positive affirmations, saying things out loud, positive things out loud to themselves about themselves, even though they might not believe it just yet. And then also taking a cold shower, and all those things that I just listed. You're not going to lose any weight really doing those things. Like, you're not going to get a 6-pack from doing those. But what it does is, if you can sit in a cold shower, for example, for 60 seconds, and it sucks, right? Especially in wintertime, depending where you're at in the world, it can be very, very uncomfortable. If you can learn to control your breathing, slow your heart rate down, be present in those 60 seconds, and tell your brain, like, hey, I know this is, you want to, it triggers your fight or flight response. You want to run away and turn the water on warm. Sit there in that uncomfortableness and let it suck for a little bit, but let your brain know and your body know, like, hey, we're not going to die. We're going to be okay. And then if you could do that little 60-second hard thing, for first thing in the morning, then maybe you can eat some vegetables today, or then maybe you can do a workout that makes you feel uncomfortable because you realize, hey, I'm not going to die doing these hard, uncomfortable things, but this is where I actually grow. Then it kind of makes the physical side of weight loss a little bit easier. And same thing with meditation, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. To sit in stillness and silence is really hard for a lot of people, especially in the Western, culture, where we're just go, 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 and we don't know how to sit still. And that's another way of training someone's mind to become comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. And really, that's the key to any transformation: spiritual, financial, emotional, is doing uncomfortable things that are they seem hard, difficult, but that's where the growth ends up happening. But if I could get them to do these smaller things first, then the bigger things that they know they have to do become a little bit easier, because their brain's like, okay, we can do these hard things. We can do the exercise now. We can do the, eating healthy food. We can do the eating, feeling a little bit hungry, which can be uncomfortable. It's really just retraining the mind first and foremost.
Yeah, man, I love that. That's really cool. I've never really thought about it that way. So, you do some of these habits, and you are training yourself to be comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. So, yeah. The journaling, the meditation, the cold shower, those all have benefits outside of this. But one of the other benefits that maybe I never thought about, maybe other people haven't thought about, is, you're finding a way to get uncomfortable and be comfortable doing that. So that's cool. We often talk about, I'll sometimes say to people, it's okay to be hungry. And this idea of parenting yourself, it's like, if you have kids, I have kids, and they want all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, they're going to ask for everything they possibly want. It doesn't mean you're going to give them everything they want. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. And so sometimes we have to parent ourselves like that. Like, just because you want to eat something doesn't mean you should eat it. And, of course there's a balance. You don't want to get into this like totally deprived state where you're, going to wake up at midnight and start rummaging through your pantry for anything. But, and that's another issue maybe, but the idea is that sometimes it's okay to say no to yourself, right? I mean, we say no to ourselves for all sorts of things, spending money on things and, doing habits that aren't good for us. So, saying no to yourself around food is uncomfortable, but maybe this is a way to get more comfortable at being able to do that.
True. Very true.
Very cool. So, oftentimes you did the fit to fat to fit. Oftentimes we see it's the other way around. It's fat to fit to fat, right? Yeah. So like the Biggest Loser thing, we've read those stories. A lot of people talk about yo-yo dieting. So, how can people get off that sort of yo-yo, that merry-go-round? So when they do lose the weight, when they go from fat to fit, how can they stay there? Because I think that sometimes is the harder thing. Well, seems to be the harder thing.
Yeah, it can be. And this is what I learned from my first experience doing fit to fat to fit is, our perception of who we are and our identity. My identity back then was I am Drew, the fit guy. I am my body. My body image was my self-image. And I think a lot of people who grew up overweight, they attach their identity to their body. So I am Joe, this big, large person that's always been big and large my whole life, right? So that's just an example. And we build our identity around that. So even when they lose the weight, their identity is still wrapped around this bigger person. And so they kind of go back to that default mode, if you will, where they lose the weight. It's amazing, but they don't almost believe that. Their identity is still, I am Joe, the bigger person. And then they slowly go back to that default mode, which is really hard for people. And so for me, when I did fit the first time and I became overweight, I had a huge identity crisis. I really did freak out, to be honest with you. Like I was so uncomfortable being overweight. I wanted to go up to strangers and explain to them like, hey, I'm not really this overweight person. I'm doing this as an experiment. Here's my before picture. Go to this website. It'll explain it. And I don't know why I'm telling you this because you're a stranger, but I was so uncomfortable being overweight because my identity was wrapped around Drew, the fit guy. And once I wasn't that, I didn't know how to handle it. And so ever since then, I've learned how to detach my body image as my self-image and realize that there's more to me than my physical body. My buddy, Chris Powell, who is a transformation specialist, had a TV show called Extreme Weight Loss on ABC, and he would help very, very morbidly obese people transform. And one of the things, the tricks that he used that I feel resonates with a lot of people is having people come up with a name for their body, almost as their body is this separate entity from them. It's a part of them, but it's not who they are. It doesn't define who they are. So they would name their body as this separate thing, this separate part of them, so that they could kind of detach themselves, their identity from their body, to realize their body is just this piece of this bigger puzzle of who they really are. And I thought that was a really cool technique where he would have people name their body as this third party person, if you will. And so people realize that that's just a part of them, that there's more to them than just what their physical body looks like. And I think that's a really important thing. So identity is important for helping people, from yo-yo dieting to detach from their body image as their self-image. I think that's a key component in helping people, maintain that weight loss. Obviously there's a physical approach to that where people, sometimes their perception is it's more of a destination than a journey. It's, hey, once I do this, lose this weight, then I can relax and then I'm done. And then I don't have to do this anymore. But they don't realize this is something that they're always going to have to work on for the rest of their life. It doesn't ever go away. You can't just like do the work and then be done with it. Same thing with, emotional transformation. And you go to therapy. It's not like, hey, I go to therapy for 3 months. Now I'm fixed. I don't need to do therapy anymore. I don't need to like do the inner work. There's always work to be done. Same thing with the physical transformation. It's got to become a part of you. It's got to become a part of your lifestyle at some point if you really want to maintain it. And the ones that figure that out maintain the weight loss. And unfortunately, a lot of people haven't figured that out or can't detach from their body image as their self-image. I think that's why a lot of people struggle with it. And so those are a few tips that I think can really, really be powerful tools for people, is learning to detach from their body image as their self-image. I would say meditation is really good for that. Journaling is good for that. Therapy is good for that. Self-reflection, getting out in nature, and becoming the observer of your thoughts rather than attaching yourself to your thoughts, which is what we've been doing our entire lives, is a very, very powerful tool that people don't really talk about in the fitness industry because it doesn't fit in. It's mostly about calories and macros and diet and exercise.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm trying to change.
How do you square sort of the positive body image movement with the idea of wanting to change your body, for health purposes, obviously. So, we don't want to shame ourselves. We want to, we want to have self-love. We want to appreciate our bodies. At the same time, maybe we're not happy with the physical state that we're in. We want to change that. So how do you put those pieces together?
It's a really good question. First and foremost, I have a lot of empathy for those that struggle with, being in larger bodies. And I feel like, because of the fitness industry and the toxicity of years and decades of what that has done to people, I see why there is this body positivity movement, which, maybe I'm not in alignment with, because it went from one extreme to this extreme. And I don't think any extremes are, represent the masses or how most people think. But I see why it's happening, to kind of push back against all the shame that's been there for years and decades. Maybe there's a balance somewhere in the middle that we can find some common ground. But I do feel like a couple things. I do feel like you can be healthier and live in a larger body if you live that lifestyle. I don't care how much body fat you have. If you eat healthy food, you eat real food, you move your body in a way that feels good to you. So some kind of exercise every day, you manage your stress as best you can, you get high quality sleep, and you're living a generally healthy lifestyle. I think you can be generally healthy and have, more fat on your body just because of maybe genetics and epigenetics. Maybe there's things outside of your control, but I don't feel like people should be shamed for trying to lose weight or trying to better their bodies or trying to live a healthier lifestyle. That's a very individual journey. And I feel like that's what I'm saying is I feel like when it comes to the extremes, it comes with unhealthy side effects of people saying, oh, well, if you're trying to lose weight, we're going to shame you because you should just love your body the way you are. I do agree. You should love your body the way it is, but there's nothing wrong with trying to improve yourself and better yourself by living a healthier lifestyle. And instead of saying, hey, self-love is eating junk food and drinking wine and eating chocolate. That's not true self-love. When you truly love yourself, you want to treat your body with kindness. And let's be honest, when you eat real food, you get good quality sleep, you're managing your stress, and you get your body out physically and you're physically active, you feel better. Your brain is sharper. Your digestion is better. You have better sex. You have better relationships. You have more energy. You have more stamina. You have better focus. You're a better employee. You're a better mom. You're a better dad. I mean, that's hard to argue, right? So self-love really should be seen as, we think sometimes discipline is the opposite of self-love, but I believe that discipline is self-love. And so I think that's the perception is people think, well, okay, I'm just going to love myself the way I am and not try and improve myself. I feel like if you're eating a bunch of junk food and not sleeping well and you're not managing your stress and you don't do any kind of hard physical activity, in the long run, that's not self-love because you're kind of damaging your body by living that lifestyle. And if you really love yourself, you're going to treat your body with kindness by doing those things, not out of a place of self-hate, not out of a place of like, I need to be skinny to fit in with society, but because I love myself enough to want to feel good. And I think that's kind of, it's a shift in perception that needs to happen. I think it's why are you doing that? Why do you want to lose weight? Most people have been wanting to lose weight because they've been bullied or made fun of, or people look down on them. And so they think that their value is based on their body. And so it's been tied to losing weight is about, serving other people and giving them what they want, but it's not really serving ourselves. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but
definitely. And there is real judgment. I mean, maybe you felt it when you had gained that weight. You may even feel it now. I mean, people get judged for being too skinny, too lean, too fat, too this, too short, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of judgment out there. So it's not that it's not real. But I think the way you described it is good. I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but I like this idea of separating you from your body. So it's like your soul is living in your body, your true self, whatever that is living in your body. It's almost like you living in your house, and you can love your house and still want a different house. You can love your house and still want to move to a larger house, a smaller house, a house somewhere else. It doesn't mean you hate your house. It just means that you want to change it, and I think that, is kind of totally fine. I don't think we should judge people either way. So I'm curious why you did this again. Like you put yourself through this
Yeah.
And then you decided to do it again. What was the purpose of going through it a second time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the first time I did it in 2011, I feel like I learned a lot of valuable lessons from that first experiment, but social media wasn't what it is today. There wasn't a lot of people that saw it as it happened. There was no Facebook Lives, there was no Insta stories, there was no live streaming of any kind back then. And so a lot of people didn't really see it as it happened. They heard about it after the fact or years later. And I was 31 at the time when I did it the first time. Different age, different metabolism, different hormones, like different place in my life. And people could see that as, oh yeah, you're 30 years old. Of course, it's going to be easier. Doing it as a 40-year-old, I wanted to give that age demographic some hope and showing them like, hey, it might be harder as you age. Yes, it can be harder, but it's still possible. So I want to give them some hope. And I wanted to do it again to allow people an opportunity to really see what it's like to go through this in hopes that my message of empathy, of having more empathy in the fitness industry is super important. And I'm going to show you why by doing this experiment again a second time to really drive home my message of this is why we need more empathy. This is why transformation is more mental and emotional than people think. And going into it, I was a little bit cocky, thinking, oh, I've done this before. I can do this. It's not going to be that hard. It was, once again, a lot more humbling than I thought it was going to be. And so those were the main reasons of why I wanted to do it a second time. And but once again, it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I was humbled and learned even more valuable lessons the second time.
Was it harder in different ways?
Yeah, it was harder in different ways. This time around, I feel like, so something personal that happened. I went through a really hard breakup with my girlfriend of 2 years during the middle of my journey. And that was hard enough to deal with, but having to also show up on camera and perform and still eat the junk food, which actually came pretty easy naturally because of going through a breakup and feeling sad and lonely and depressed, gravitating towards the Ben & Jerry's ice cream and the chocolate and the wine. It was so interesting how powerful that became for me. And I realized why so many people gravitate towards food in tough emotional times, because food is, like I said, the most easily accessible drug we have. And yes, it temporarily makes you feel better for a short period of time. And if you could distract yourself from the emotional pain of life, situations that you're going through, then I feel like it's easier to get through that by suppressing it with substances like food and alcohol and those kinds of things that we have access to. I understood why people gravitate towards that type of substance to temporarily make you feel better. And it's why so many people get stuck in emotional eating, because we eat our emotions and we don't like to experience uncomfortable things. So we make ourselves feel comfortable by eating these foods, which temporarily do the trick, but in the long run, really just kind of keep that pain coming back if we don't ever face it. So Rumi, there's a good quote by Rumi: the cure for pain is in the pain, but we don't like to be uncomfortable and face the pain. We want to run away from it and numb it and distract ourselves from that pain. Mm-hmm. But if you do that, the pain just keeps coming up again and again and again until you face it, learn from it, grow from it, and release it.
Yeah, man. That is truth.
Yeah.
So you have a book called Fit to Fat to Fit, mm-hmm. and highly recommend reading that. You're an inspirational person. I'm sure your book is very inspiring. I guess you sort of share some of your journey in there, and you've got a website, fittofattofit.com. Is that, yep. And that's fit and then the number 2?
Yeah.
So like fit to fat to fit.com. What do people find in the book if they pick it up and read it?
Yeah, so that book kind of entails my entire journey of gaining and losing weight and the unexpected lessons that I learned from that experience. And that was written in 2011, 2012. I do have a second book called Complete Keto, which takes the lessons I learned on the mental and emotional side and ties it into a ketogenic approach. And I came out with that book in 2017, 2018. So I do have 2 books available. Both you can just find at fittofattofit.com or on Amazon as well. But yeah, you'll be able to, if you're struggling with the mental and emotional side of transformation, you can't figure out why you can't just live a healthy lifestyle consistently. Both of those books are good books, but you can start with Fit to Fat to Fit if you want. And even if you don't do keto, the Complete Keto book can be applied to any diet that you end up doing or want to do, because the principles are still the same.
What are you doing these days? Are you still following a largely ketogenic diet, or have you shifted that at all?
Yeah, I cycle in and out of keto. Right now, I'm currently not. I have a more of an, I would say, a higher protein approach to keto, just because of the phase of life that I'm in. And, you know, I have 2 daughters that are 10 and 12. And so I need some more flexibility. And for me, you know, I definitely switch things up, and I'm always experimenting to figure out what works best for me at certain periods of time. So right now it's more of a whole foods approach still with, but a little bit more carbs, maybe like 100 grams of carbs per day, which feels great for me. And but a higher protein approach right now. And that's kind of what works best for me.
So you're not vegan, so that's good.
No, I'm not vegan. Yeah, I did a vegan experiment during my second Fit to Fat Fit journey. And that was very eye-opening for me. I just did blood work before and after, and kind of showed the downsides to vegan, but then, you know, maybe some positive things for some people if they do it the right way. I think there's a right way and wrong way to do any diet.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Drew. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate your time and inspiring message. Appreciate you coming on. So everybody check out Drew's website, fit2fat2fit.com. Pick up his books, and you know, I don't know, are you still doing any type of coaching, or you have programs, anything like that, if people really connect with you?
Thank you so much. People go to fit2fat2fit.com. They'll see all my programs, my books. I have a line of supplements called Complete Wellness that they can check out too. And, you know, I'll just push people to there, or on social media. Fit2fat2fit is all the same on all handles. So,
okay, there you go. Drew Manning. Thank you, man.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Brian.
Right. Take care.